Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another Gold Derby Slugfest. This time we're going to be talking about what just won at the Writers Guild Awards and the Producers Guild Awards. Not a lot of surprises, but we'll talk about them anyway and what it means for the Oscars. I'm Marcus James Dixon. I'm here with Zach Laws, Daniel Montgomery, and Daniel, let's go to you first. Let's talk about WGA because that happened first. So we had Promising Young Woman win original, and we had Borat when adapted. A lot of people didn't see the Borat when coming. Did you?
I didn't. I thought after the Oscar, whenever the Oscar nominations happen, I always go back to my the guilds. Whenever the guilds happen, I always look at what the Oscar nominees are and go back to the guilds and move things up and down. And since One Night in Miami and Borat had gotten into adapted screenplay at the Oscars, I thought, okay, it's probably one of those. And of those, this has got to be the place where they give it to One Night in Miami, because Borat seems like such an odd film, especially because it's so largely improvised. So no, I didn't have that winning. I do think that helps. I don't think that helps it win the Oscar because The Father wasn't eligible at the Writers Guild. The Nomadland wasn't eligible at the Writers Guild. And I think it's still a two-way race there. But I think it probably helps. The writers branch of the Academy might be voting for Maria Bakalova. But yeah, that one surprised me more. Of course, you two can gloat because you both predicted both screenplay winners correctly, and I got them both wrong. So I was predicting One Night in Miami and Trial of the Chicago 7, even though that one's less surprising because I knew that could go either way between Aaron Sorkin and Emerald Fennell. So yeah, I do think the Borat one was surprising. Promising Young Woman less so in hindsight. I do think that makes Promising Young Woman the best screenplay Oscar winner. I don't think it makes Borat the best screenplay Oscar winner.
Right. So Zach, did you want to gloat? How did you get both right, first of all?
Yeah, I'll gloat. Okay. So the reason I went with Borat was because it, even though One Night in Miami felt like a more kind of traditional winner, and they're both up at the Oscars as well as The White Tiger. Those were the three in adapted that were able to translate from the Guild to the Academy. It felt like Borat, with the Golden Globe win for Best Comedy Film, with the Maria Bakalova nomination and supporting actress, and her continuing to ascend in our odds, it felt like Borat had more wind beneath its sails than One Night in Miami did, which, for all intents and purposes, really disappointed in the Oscar race by not being nominated for picture or director, nominations that a lot of people assumed it would get. So it felt like the buzz for that had died down, and the buzz for Borat, which, is also not nominated for Best Picture, but kind of feels like it was maybe in ninth place based on all the...
They got the Producers Guild nomination.
I mean, that too, right? It just kind of felt like they would be more inclined to reward that. And I know it feels like an odd winner because of how highly improvised it was, but remember, this is the same branch that gave this is the same guild, I should say, that gave an award to Michael Moore for Bowling for Columbine back in 2002. So they're not disinclined from making choices that may feel odd to us because we say, well, where's the writing there? But there is screenwriting in Borat, just like there's screenwriting in Bowling for Columbine, right? It's different from what we typically think of, but that doesn't mean that writers aren't going to appreciate that. So that wasn't a surprise to me, but I think I can understand why it was surprising, just because it is such a non-traditional pick. Right. As far as original goes, look, I mean, there's just been this narrative all season long about Emerald Fennell and Chloe Zhao. The fact that these two women have made history in the Best Director category, the fact that their films are such major contenders. And I've been feeling for a long time that because Emerald's not going to win director over Chloe Zhao, screenplay feels like a really good place to reward her achievement. We often look at the screenplay categories as sort of a consolation Best Director prize, right? You're not going to win that one, but you're going to win something. Sofia Coppola comes to mind, like one of the few women to win for screenwriting this century.
Jordan Peele also.
Jordan Peele, exactly. Yeah.
Even
So
Spike Lee for Black Klansman.
exactly.
Taika Waititi.
Taika, there's so many examples of this. And while I don't think that Borat's going to translate into the Oscar winner because of the factor of Nomadland and The Father, I do think that this, if anybody's having trouble predicting best original screenplay, I think that the Guild is a really good indication that they're going to go with Emerald Fennell for Promising Young Woman, which might end up being, I know a lot of us are thinking Carey Mulligan's going to win Best Actress, but in all seriousness, this could be the only place that Promising Young Woman gets rewarded with something, right? So we have to keep that in mind as we're making our predictions.
A little bit later, we'll talk about the experts' predictions for Best Picture, and one of them thinks Promising is winning Best Picture. So there's a little teaser for later. So for adapted, after Borat won, I did move it up in my Oscar predictions to number 2, but really 2 through 5 don't matter. I think we all know Chloe's winning for adapted screenplay for Nomadland, which was not eligible at the Writers Guild, which is why it didn't win over there. And then for original, I do agree with everything you said about Promising Young Woman winning there. Second place I have Minari, but that's also a tough category in that what's in second? Like if Emerald loses original, what do you guys think would win? Maybe Aaron Sorkin for Trial?
I think Aaron Sorkin still has a shot, but right now I would say if Minari is your number 2 for picture, then it's also a potential surprise for screenplay for all the same reasons that that Emerald Fennell would be. I believe Minari was also ineligible at the Writers Guild Awards, so
it was.
See that could be like a stealth contender, just because we didn't see how that would compare to the other two. Unlike in adapted, where neither of the perceived frontrunners, The Father or Nomadland, were even in the running. Now it looks like, oh well, now it's going to be Promising Young Woman. We haven't seen Minari in a head-to-head for the industry votes at the Oscars yet. So if that film goes on to win Best Picture, I think you see it first with a screenplay surprise.
I do think that, in terms of the adapted screenplay race, it is important to think about how The Father is a stealth contender there. It's funny because we haven't seen Nomadland and The Father go up against each other in a screenplay race yet, the way that we have seen, Promising Young Woman and Trial of the Chicago 7 go up against each other. They're going to be competing against each other at BAFTA, where I think The Father could actually win that. I feel like there's some potential for an upset just because Chloe is so far out ahead for Best Director. People, I think you might as well engrave her name on the statuette for that by now, right? Exactly. So adapted screenplay might be the place to reward The Father, which is a more popular movie at the Academy than a lot of people thought it was going to be. If it's not going to win Best Actor for Anthony Hopkins, if Olivia Colman's not going to win Supporting Actress, screenplay feels like an appropriate place to reward that movie. So I'm really interested to see what happens at BAFTA when they go up against each other head to head. I wouldn't count that out as being a surprise Oscar winner.
Yeah, I would say that Nomadland is safer for director than it is for screenplay. I think The Father is really close.
And also, keep in mind that, Nomadland is such a directorial movie, right? It's so much about the visual images, and so much of it is about just the way that the camera picks up Frances McDormand's facial expressions and, captures her in these vast landscapes. Whereas The Father is a much more writerly film, it's much more about the dialogue, and it's much more about the ways in which it plays with time and it could really be something that we need to look out for.
And The Father was adapted from a play, just like One Night in Miami, but The Father felt way more cinematic, like I was watching a movie as opposed to One Night in Miami, which was more like a play on the big screen.
Yeah. And I think voters probably thought that as well, since it got a Best Picture nomination. And nominations for things like editing and production design, right? Which usually these like talky, stagey movies don't get tech nominations.
Well, that was the WGA, and then a few days later was the PGA. We had Nomadland, of course, win Best Picture there. And Zach, you were watching the virtual ceremony, right? I'm curious,
Yeah.
what was that like? Because the average public, Daniel and I, couldn't watch it. So it was virtual presenters, was everything Zoom?
Pretty much. I mean, it was sort of, it was the same length as the WGA, but half the categories. So there was actually like room to breathe. The WGA said pre-taped acceptance speeches and played them as the winners were announced live. I think that the PGA did the same thing, but don't quote me on that. I think it was a lot. It was, for all intents and purposes, a live program with people zooming in and giving their acceptance speeches. I think the acceptance speeches were live because some people got played off. So,
oh, there you go.
But yeah, I mean, what's so weird about this? Because I think we've all gone to Guild Awards before. You can really feel the energy in the room for certain contenders, and that's a way that we determine what we're going to predict to win, right? So, like, you don't get that sense of, yay, Nomadland won, or oh geez, Nomadland won again. Can't believe this. So it's kind of hard to gauge in that sense. But yeah, I mean, it was interesting to watch. They tried to do a lot of the same kinds of things of having a person from each film present clips and talk about the nominees, and they presented lifetime achievement awards, and they did a good deal of making up for the oddities of virtual ceremonies.
Well, it was around this time a few years ago that La La Land kept winning everything, and you could feel this backlash growing of La La Land again. Like, is there anything else that could win Best Picture? I'm not feeling that this year for Nomadland. Yes, you're right. It keeps winning everything, except for WGA where it wasn't eligible. But I'm not feeling this anger toward or this jealousy toward Nomadland just, towering over all these other films. Do you guys feel that at all? Or do you think that with this PGA win, in addition to everything else, that it's the front runner to win the Oscar and nothing else can beat it? Daniel?
It's a little hard to tell, again, because things are virtual, so we're not in the rooms where these things are happening. To hear like the cheers or the groans, and even when they're televised, a lot of times they're virtual, so there's not like a big crowd of people in a room to gauge a reaction of. It's a little like there could be something brewing for all we know, of people like several thousand or Academy members who are going to vote for the winners, looking at the winning streak, going like, oh, it wasn't my favorite movie, and they're not necessarily tweeting about it, and they're not getting on Zoom and broadcasting those opinions. So it's possible, but Nomadland just inherently is much more of an underdog story, not just what's on screen, but in terms of it being a very modest, low budget, independent film, intimate story. And it's got the narrative of Chloe Zhao of being the first woman of color to win Best Director, and being only the second woman ever of any ethnicity to win Best Director, which is hard to beat. Because it actually does remind me of The Hurt Locker in that way, where The Hurt Locker was this really small movie. It didn't make a lot of money at the box office. Of course, that's not as much a factor this year, and yet just the swell of support for Catherine Bigelow really pushed that movie to everything else. And any other year, any other director, that film probably wouldn't have won under other circumstances. And I think it might be similar here, but again, it's hard to tell when you're not when you're not like like talking to Oscar members, Academy members, like about what they thought and hearing their cheers or their boos.
And Zach, you're our social media manager. You're always on the Twitters and the Facebooks. Are you getting a sense that people are over this Nomadland steamroll or not?
Not at all. I mean, I feel so much enthusiasm for that movie from people. And like, I'll admit, when I first saw the movie, I thought it was fantastic. I thought it was beautifully made and all the things that you'd want a movie to be. But I also thought, is this really going to be accessible to Oscar voters in the way that, something like, a Parasite or Green Book, right? For as different as those movies are, they had a lot of audience support, right? Nomadland, when it premiered on Hulu and more people started to see it, I heard all of this, just positive admiration for the film, for people who are just stuck at home and catching up with it for the very first time. It really feels like the movie for right now. We've had such a horrible year where nobody's been able to leave their homes and be with their families and, or friends. And, this movie is about connection and empathy. And, I think that really speaks to people right now. Now, the other movie I think that does that is Minari, which Marcus, you and I were both predicting that to win early on. The problem is that, like, Minari is an underdog and people really love it, but the people who love Minari don't hate Nomadland.
Exactly.
You know what I mean? Like, that's because when Moonlight and Parasite won, there was this sort of like fatigue about, God, I can't believe La La Land's going to win, or I can't believe 1917 is going to win. Like, they're fine, but Moonlight is the one that I love. Parasite's the one that I love. People really do have a lot of admiration and affection for this film. And I think that I don't know what the backlash is. They haven't found it yet. I'm sure they're looking for it, but can you even think about what the backlash would be?
I have seen a couple of articles. I think one on Vulture. I didn't read it, but I saw the headline as I was scrolling by it, talking about how, it lets Amazon off the hook, or it's not hard enough on Amazon. I've heard a criticism that's just like, it's just kind of poverty porn, which I disagree with wholeheartedly. Like there is a poverty porn contender at this year's Oscars, and it's not Nomadland. But yeah, I do think there's a little bit of that, but I honestly, I don't see that catching on, in the larger sense, because again, the film is not pro-capitalism. So it's like the Amazon thing. It's like, well, maybe if this were if this were an expose about a woman working at Amazon, maybe, but that's just one part of the story, not the central focus. So yeah, I don't see where else it comes from.
If I was an Oscar voter, I would put Minari at number one. I thought it was the better film, the more entertaining film. I felt a connection to all these characters. But I would put Nomadland at like 2 or 3. So, if my Minari vote gets thrown out because of the preferential ballot, Nomadland would be there, right behind it. But as Zach was saying earlier, Nomadland may have enough support that it could win on the first round of votes, and nothing, the preferential ballot portion, where they kick out the films that didn't get enough votes. Maybe that process won't even happen because Nomadland will just win, by 50+1% right away on the first round.
I think that's what happened last year with Parasite. I don't think it won on the preferential ballot. I think it got the most number 1 votes, as evidenced by the number of major wins that it got. And Nomadland is a movie that we know it's going to win director. It could win screenplay. It's at least the front runner there. It's the front runner in cinematography. And
That's
don't count out Frances McDormand. She could very easily win at BAFTA, where Carey Mulligan is not nominated. The only 2 people from the Oscars that are up there are her and Vanessa Kirby. I think a lot of people are going with Vanessa Kirby just because she's the homegrown talent. but that doesn't always mean something to them. And especially considering that Nomadland is a vastly more popular film with them than Pieces of a Woman is, I wouldn't count her out. And I wouldn't count her out at SAG either, because Nomadland's not up for anything else at SAG. If they want to reward this movie with something there, Frances McDormand is their only option. So, like, with this Best Actress race as all over the place as it has been, I would not discount her chances. I know she's going to win a third if she wins Best Picture because she's a producer, but people don't really know that, you know? Like, I know that some people are probably aware of it, but like, I don't know that it's as widely known that Frances McDormand is a producer on this movie and would win an Oscar for it, right? Like, they could just be thinking to themselves, I love her performance and I want her to win something for it. I'm going to vote for her. Like,
well, us three editors are kind of boring in our Best Picture predictions because we have Nomadland at 1, Minari at 2, Promising Young Woman at 3, Trial of the Chicago 7 at 4. So we all agree there, but our experts are a little bit different. Tom O'Neill, Gold Derby founder, is predicting Promising Young Woman to win Best Picture. Tara Khan, Fox TV, is predicting the Trial of the Chicago 7.
what is your cat
Kevin
picking?
Palawi of Yahoo is predicting Minari. She liked Parasite from last year. Nikki Novak from Fandango is predicting Minari. And there was one more. Oh, Thelma Adams, one of our Gold Derby contributors, is predicting Mank. So there is a lot of fluidity in the experts. They are more kind of all over the place than us editors are. So of those, which expert do you think is completely crazy?
Honestly, I wouldn't say crazy, but I'd say Mank is vanishingly unlikely. Just like, it got the director nomination, but actually, in the era of the preferential ballot, missing in screenplay is worse than missing in director. Like, more movies, like, no movie has missed screenplay and won Best Picture since the Oscars expanded. In fact, no movies missed screenplay and won Best Picture since Titanic. While we've had a couple of films win Best Picture without director nominations. So I think Mank is out. Mank is probably going to win nothing, but I'd say it's still looking safe for production design. We'll see what the Guild says. But yeah, I'd say Mank is probably the least likely of those predictions.
What about Trial?
I think Trial still has a shot.
Yeah, I mean, I guess if it wins SAG Ensemble next Sunday,
Yeah, it's possible.
but I think Minari's going to win that, and hence why it's my number 2. I mean, Trial, the problem with Trial is that it is also fading. Losing the PGA, losing the WGA. The only thing it's won so far is the Globe for Best Screenplay, but they love Aaron Sorkin there, much the same way that they love Quentin Tarantino. Remember, Tarantino won the Globe for screenwriting last year for Once Upon a Time in Hollywood and did not win the Oscar eventually. He lost to Bong Joon-ho for Parasite. So I feel like, we should say, like, the people who might be the most spot on are the folks picking Minari. And also, there is something to what our founder, Tom O'Neill, is saying with Promising Young Woman, in that it is a movie with a lot of passionate support. It's a movie that we all think is going to win screenplay and is the front runner as of right now for Best Actress, although that can change. So those two combined could signal a Best Picture win for this movie. But I feel like if it's just a straight number 1 vote, Nomadland's going to beat Promising Young Woman, right? It just has more of the broad general support. Promising Young Woman, I don't know how well it performs on a preferential ballot, because there might be a few Academy members who are just like, this is not my cup of tea, let's say. obviously it got enough support to be one of the only films to get nominations in all of those key areas: acting, directing, writing, editing, that we look at. But I mean, it's my number 3. It wouldn't surprise me, but yeah, it's it's so boring talking about Best Picture these days, because we all just we think it's a movie that it's going to be a movie that everybody loves, right? So
let's talk about something exciting, and this could be our last category before we wrap up. There was an upset at PGA for documentary feature. A lot of people at Gold Derby had Time winning, but instead it was My Octopus Teacher. And now when I'm looking at the Gold Derby odds for this category, Time is still winning at, for the Oscars, according to our predictions. My Octopus Teacher is 2nd, Collective is 3rd, Crip Camp is 4th, and The Mole Agent is 5th.
For the record, I checked those odds yesterday. My Octopus Teacher was 3rd yesterday, so It's already moving up.
And I'm one of the reasons, because I moved it up in my predictions after it won. And I actually watched it last night. I hadn't seen it before, and I really enjoyed My Octopus Teacher. So what does this mean for the Oscars? Because I mean, it's not always that these two match up, the PGA and the Oscars, in this specific category. And in fact, Daniel, I think you just wrote about this, right?
Yeah, I just wrote about this because it was starting to look to me like, once it won the Producers Guild Award, I was like, oh, this is going to be the feel-good movie that beats the kind of darker or more heavy-hitting or expose kind of subjects. Time is all about the justice system and incarceration. Collective is about a deadly fire and corruption, and those two films that are also in the top 3 are so dark and likely might appeal to similar voters that this could be like the year 20 Feet from Stardom beat The Act of Killing, and that was the year The Act of Killing was a hugely critically acclaimed film. I adored that film. It is bleak as hell. So 20 Feet from Stardom, in hindsight, not surprised that it won. And I actually went back. The PGA and the Oscar don't always match up for Best Documentary, but it's usually because the winner at PGA isn't even nominated at the Oscars. When the winner at PGA is nominated at the Oscars, it has won every time. The last time it didn't was Sicko, Michael Moore Sicko in 2007. That's 13 years ago. So the only 2 Oscar nominees that were up for PGA, I think it was the only 2, were that and Time. So My Octopus Teacher winning that, and My Octopus Teacher having other Guild nominations that are yet to be cited, and Time I don't think does. It makes me think, this might be My Octopus Teacher.
Yeah, I mean, I think the fact is that there was no front runner in this category until last night. I know that Time was the default front runner, but that was always a weird front runner. I think it's a beautiful piece of art, but those kinds of documentaries don't tend to win. Like Danny said, with The Act of Killing, or it reminded me a lot of something like I Am Not Your Negro from 2016, where it was more just a kind of a mood piece, a sort of meditation on race in America, whereas something, it lost to OJ Made in America, right? Which was this more kind of expansive audience crowd pleaser type thing. It's so funny because I had watched My Octopus Teacher Tuesday night, so right before the PGAs, and I remember thinking, wow, this is a really beautifully made, emotional film. This could be a surprise winner. Sure enough, it was. I think that
Riley Chow predicted it at the PGA, so he gets credit. He got 100%.
I was so close to switching to it. I moved it up to 2nd place, but I'm like, I didn't want to, because Time was still like the favorite in terms of, where our odds were. So I'm like, I didn't want to be the knucklehead who changes it and gets it wrong. And then I lose a point basically to everyone else's average who got it right. So I could have had 10 for 10, but I chickened out. I've had it ranked 2nd.
But I think now rank it 1st because it's, it reminds me a lot of Free Solo from, I think that was 2 years ago.
2 years.
Free Solo was this movie that had this incredible cinematography of, like going up that mountain and, the cameras are dangling all over the place and it was so wide and expansive. And My Octopus Teacher has a similar kind of thing where it's like the underwater photography in that movie is mind-blowing. It's so beautiful to look at. It's
And
like,
there's a danger element too between the
Yes.
two. Like, I mean, I don't want to spoil My Octopus Teacher, but there are sharks.
yeah, it's like he's like this close to the sharks, and I mean,
Mhm.
obviously he's got different lenses on the camera, but it's too close to comfort for those of us who grew up afraid of sharks because of watching Jaws. I think that it's just like it's got that perfect combination of emotion and scope that voters in this category, voters in the Academy, love in this category. So I think this is an easy front runner now. And all the films nominated, I should say, are really great in their own ways.
You're right. 4 of the 5 are really great.
Marcus isn't going to say which one he didn't like because we keep that to ourselves. So.
But did you have anything else, or should we tease what we're gonna do next week?
I think we've covered it. Yeah, let's talk about what we're going to do next week.
So the SAG Awards are coming up on April 4th. So we are going to do a slugfest where we're going to predict all of those categories: film, TV, stunts. Let's do stunts. So yeah, that will be our little slugfest for, I guess, the first week of April. But yeah, thanks everyone for watching, and go make your predictions. Update your Oscar predictions. Now that we know WGA, we know PGA, you're probably gonna make some changes, put some things, change your rankings around, and comment down in the message in the comments sections to tell us how smart or how dumb we are about some of our predictions.
Mostly how
Thank
smart.
you.
And before we go, speaking of updated predictions, we just want to let all of you know who are watching. Because SAG voting ends on Tuesday and they're going to pre-record that program, we don't want to risk any kind of spoilers coming out and people maybe using that to change their predictions. So the last day that you can make your SAG predictions are this coming Tuesday, which is March 30th. Yes. Had to check my calendar. So make sure you make your predictions for that before the prediction center closes down. Thank you all for watching.